In a small village nestled on the edge of a dense forest, there lived a tortoise named Oluronbi. Oluronbi was unlike any tortoise the village had ever known. His hair was old and worn, and his steps were slow and deliberate. But it wasn't his appearance that made Oluronbi stand out. It was his insatiable greed. He was always scheming, always looking for ways to trick others and to fill his belly with more than his fair share of food. The animals of the forest were wary of Oluronbi, but they couldn't help but admire his cleverness. Despite his greed, he had a way with words and could always convince others to give him what he wanted. Oluronbi prided himself on the ability, believing himself to be the smartest creature in the entire forest. One day, as Oluronbi was wandering through the forest, he overheard a group of birds chanting excitedly in the branches above him. They said, "The king feast is coming soon," one bird chirped. "It is going to be the most magnificent event we have ever seen. Animals from all over the land will be there." Oluronbi's ear perked up at the mention of a feast. His mouth watered at the thought of all the delicious food that could surely be served. He knew he had to attend this feast no matter what. But how will I get there? Oluronbi thought to himself. The king's palace is far away, across the great river, and I cannot swim. The journey is too long for a tortoise like me to make on foot. As he pondered this dilemma, he spotted his old friend, Akambi the sparrow, perched on a nearby branch. An idea began to form in Oluronbi's mind. He put on his most charming smile and called up to his friend. "Akambi, my dear friend, how wonderful to see you. I couldn't help but overheard your conversation. It sounds like the king feast is going to be a grand affair. I would love to attend, but alas, my old legs won't carry me that far." Akambi, who was kind-hearted and trusting, nodded sympathetically. "It is true, Oluronbi. The feast is quite far from here, but if you wish to attend, I can ask my bird friends to carry you across the great river. We will be happy to help." Oluronbi beamed with delight. "Oh, Akambi, you are too kind. I will be forever grateful if you could help me attend this magnificent feast. I promise to contribute something special to the celebration." With that promise, Akambi flew off to gather his bird friends, and together they devised a plan to help Oluronbi reach the king's palace. They found a sturdy gourd and tied it to a long vine, creating a sort of swing that the bird could carry with their backs. Oluronbi climbed into the gourd, and the bird lifted him into the air, soaring high above the forest. As they flew, Oluronbi marveled at the sight below him. He could see the winding river glistening in the sun, the dense canopy of the forest stretching out as far as the eye could see, and in the distance, a towering spire of the king's palace. His excitement grew with each passing moment. After a long journey, the birds finally arrived at the palace. They gently set Oluronbi down at the entrance, and he thanked them profoundly for their kindness. The palace was even more magnificent up close, with tall, golden gates and lush gardens filled with exotic plants and flowers. The smell of roasting meat and fresh baked bread filled the air, making Oluronbi's stomach rumble with anticipation. Inside the palace, the feast was already underway. Long tables were piled high with every type of fruit imaginable. Ripe fruits, roasted yams, steaming bowls of jollof rice, pepper soup, and the finest meats. Oluronbi's eyes widened at the sight. He had never seen so much food in one place. But Oluronbi quickly realized that there was a problem. The palace guard were standing at the entrance to the banquet hall, checking each guest's invitation. Oluronbi didn't have any invitation, but he was not about to let that stop him. He needed a plan. He needed it quickly. As he stood there pondering his option, he noticed a large group of animals approaching the entrance. At the head of the group was a tall, elegant peacock with vibrant and shimmering feathers. It was Oluye, the peacock, a well-known noble in the animal kingdom. He was surrounded by his entourage of admirers. Oluronbi's eyes lit up with another idea. He quickly scurried over to the group and positioned himself near the back, trying to blend in with the crowd. As Oluye and his entourage approached the guard, Oluronbi shuffled along with them, keeping his head low and his shells hidden behind the taller animals. The guard, recognizing Oluye and his entourage, waved them through without question. Oluronbi held his breath. keeping his head down and slipped past the guard unnoticed. Once inside, he quickly made his way to one of the tables and began to fill the plate with food. Oluronbi was in heaven. He piled his plate high with roasted meats, yam porridge, fried plantain, and every delicious dish he could reach. He ate with abandon, shoving food into his mouth as quickly as he could swallow. He paid no attention to other guests who were beginning to notice his greedy behavior. As the feast went on, Oluronbi's plate grew emptier, but his appetite only seemed to grow stronger. He moved from table to table, grabbing more food, drinks, more palm wine, and stuffing his face with anything he could find. The other animals began to whisper among themselves, shocked at the tortoise's shamelessness. At last, the king's herald stood up and called for silence. "My friends," he announced, "our great king has prepared a special surprise for the grand feast. A dessert of the rarest and most delicious fruit from across the land. It is an honor to share this delicacy with you all." The other guests shared in excitement, but Oluronbi's eyes gleamed with greed. "I must have this fruit," he thought. "I must have them all." As the dessert was brought out, Oluronbi pushed his way to the front of the line, knocking over smaller animals and grabbing the largest bowl of fruit for himself. He began to eat with even more fervor, juice dripping down his chin and his eyes wide with greed. But Oluronbi's behavior had not gone unnoticed. The king, who had been watching the tortoise antics from his throne, frowned in disapproval. "Who is this gluttonous creature?" the king asked his advisor. "He does not seem to belong here." The king's advisor whispered among themselves, trying to determine who the strange tortoise was. At last, one of them spoke up. "Your Majesty, I believe that's Oluronbi, a tortoise from the nearby village. He is known for his greed and cunning." The king nodded thoughtfully. "I see. It seems that Oluronbi has taken advantage of our hospitality. We must teach him a lesson." With that, the king called for his guards and whispered his instructions. The guards nodded and quickly moved into action. They approached Oluronbi, who was still greedily devouring the fruits, and tapped him on the shoulder. "Oluronbi," one of the guards stated sternly, "you have been caught taking more than your fair share. The king has ordered that you be removed from the feast." Oluronbi's eyes widened in shock. But, I'm a guest here," he protested. "I have every right to enjoy the feast." The guard shook his head. "You are no guest. You have deceived your way in and showed nothing but greed. Now you must leave." The guard grabbed Oluronbi in his shell and began to drag him towards the palace gate. Panicking, Oluronbi tried to resist, but his full stomach made it difficult for him to move quickly. As he struggled, he accidentally knocked over one of the dessert tables, sending a large bowl of fruit crashing on the ground. The other guests gasped in shock, and the king's frowns deepened. "Enough!" the king declared. "Oluronbi, your greed has caused enough trouble, and you will be punished for your actions." With that, the guard carried Oluronbi out of the palace and took him to the edge of the great river. They placed him in a small wooden boat and set him adrift in the river's swift current. Oluronbi, terrified and remorseful, clung to the side of the boat as he bobbed and swayed in the rushing water. He realized too late that his greed had led him to this dire situation. As the boat drifted further from the palace, Oluronbi began to weep. "I have been a fool," he cried. "I let my greed get the better of me, and now I'm alone and lost." The boat continued to drift down the river, taking Oluronbi further and further from the forest and the village he called home. He didn't know how long he floated on the river, but eventually the boat washed ashore on the distant bank, far from the familiar sights and sound of his homeland. Weak and exhausted, Oluronbi crawled out of the boat and collapsed on the river bank. His shell was cracked and stretched from the journey, and his body ached from the rough ride. He knew that he would have to find a new home in this strange, unfamiliar land. As he lay there, feeling the weight of his greed and mistakes, Oluronbi reflected on his actions. He had been so consumed by his desire for more that he has lost sight of everything else: the kindness of his friends, the value of sharing, and the importance of humility. After resting for a while, Oluronbi slowly pushed himself up, his legs shaky and his shell heavy. He knew he had to find food and shelter if he was to survive in this new land. But this time, he vowed to do things differently. No more scheming, no more trickery. He would live honestly and humble, sharing with others and helping those in need. Days turned into weeks as Oluronbi wandered through the unfamiliar forest. He encountered many new animals, none of whom knew his past. At first, they were wary of the strange tortoise with cracked shell, but Oluronbi was kind and polite, and he always offers to share what little food he could find. One day, as Oluronbi was searching for food near a small clearing, he heard a soft whimpering sound. Curious, he followed the noise and found a small frightened squirrel trapped under a fallen branch. The squirrel's eyes were wide with fear, and it was struggling to free itself. Oluronbi's first instinct was to ignore the squirrel and continue on his way. After all, he needed to look after himself now. But then he remembered his promise to change, to be better. He sighed and approached the trapped animal. "Hold still," Oluronbi said gently. "Let me help you." Using all his strength, Oluronbi pushed the heavy branch off the squirrel. The little creature scrambled to his feet and looked up at Oluronbi with grateful eyes. "Thank you," the squirrel squeaked. "I thought I was done for. How can I ever repay you?" Oluronbi smiled and shook his head. "No need for repayment. Just promise to help someone else in need when you can." The squirrel nodded eagerly and scrambled off into the trees. Disappearing among the branches, Oluronbi felt a warm glow in his chest. It was a feeling he had never experienced for a long time. A sense of satisfaction that came not from filling his belly, but from doing something good for another. As the weeks turned into months, Oluronbi continued to help those he met along his journey. He pulled a young fowl from a thorn bush, helped a lost bird find its way home, and even guided an old blind rabbit to a freshwater spring. Each act of kindness brought him new friends, with a deep sense of fulfillment. Words of Oluronbi's deeds spread throughout the forest, and soon, animals from all over began to seek him out for help and advice. They admired his wisdom and the willingness to share, and they no longer saw him as a greedy tortoise with a cracked shell, but as a friend and a helper. One day, while Oluronbi was resting by a small stream, a group of familiar birds flew down from the sky and landed near him. It was Akambi the sparrow and his friends. They had been searching for Oluronbi for many weeks, worried about what had become of him after the feast at the king's palace. "Oluronbi," Akambi cried, rushing to his side. "We have been looking everywhere for you. We are so worried when you disappeared after the feast." Oluronbi looked up in surprise. His heart swelled with emotion. He had thought he would never see his old friends again. "Akambi," he said softly, "I am so sorry for what happened. I was foolish and greedy, and I took advantage of your kindness. I don't deserve your friendship." Akambi shook his head. "You made a mistake, yes, but you have changed. We have heard of your good deeds you have done here, and we are proud of you. You have become a better tortoise, Oluronbi, and we want you to come back home with us." Oluronbi felt tears welling up his eyes. He had thought he was lost forever, but now, here we are his friends, offering him a second chance. "Thank you," he whispered. "I will be honored to return with you." The bird helped Oluronbi onto their makeshift gas swing once more, and together they lifted him into the air. As they flew back across the great river, Oluronbi looked down at the forest below, feeling a deep sense of peace and gratitude. He knew he had been given a second chance to live a better life, and he vowed never to let greed and selfish guide him again. When they finally reached the village, Oluronbi was welcomed back with an open arms. The animals cheered and celebrated his return, not because of the tricks he used to play, but because of the good heart he had shown in the end. From that day forward, Oluronbi lived a life full of kindness and generosity, always remembering the lesson he had learned about greed, friendship, and the true meaning of happiness. And so, Oluronbi the tortoise, once known for his greed, became a symbol of change and redemption, reminding everyone in the forest that no matter how far one strays, it is never too late to find one's way back to the path of kindness and goodness. Hey guys, if you really love the story, please subscribe and like and share. Comment the moral lesson you learned in this video.